On the night of August 15, 2016, in a quiet, affluent neighborhood just north of Palm Beach County, Florida, something happened that defied comprehension. Two innocent people lost their lives in a brutal, seemingly random attack. A third person was severely injured trying to save them. And at the center of it all was a 19-year-old college student with no criminal record, good grades, and by all accounts, a promising future. This is the story of Austin Harrouff, a case that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about mental illness, criminal responsibility, and the fragile boundary between sanity and madness. It's a story with no winners, only victims. The couple who died in their garage, the neighbor who tried to save them, the families left behind, and in a different way, a young man whose mind betrayed him in the most catastrophic way imaginable. Austin Kelly Harrouff was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach County, Florida, into what appeared to be an ideal situation. His father, Wade Harrouff, was a successful dentist. His mother, Mina, worked as a pharmacist. The family lived in Jupiter, Florida, one of the wealthiest communities in the United States, where luxury homes line pristine beaches and billionaires are neighbors. Palm Beach County has long been known as a paradise for the wealthy. With its perfect weather, prestigious golf courses, and waterfront estates, it's home to 44 billionaires as of recent counts. The Harrouff family may not have been billionaires, but they were certainly comfortable, providing Austin and his younger sister Haley with every advantage. Austin attended Suncoast Community High School in Riviera Beach, where he enrolled in the prestigious International Baccalaureate program, a rigorous curriculum that offers college-level courses to high school students. Throughout his 4 years, Austin never received a grade lower than a C. He particularly excelled in science courses, biology, chemistry, statistics, and mathematical analysis. But Austin wasn't just academically gifted. At 6 feet tall and roughly 200 pounds, he was built like an athlete. He played football for all 4 years of high school and wrestled during his sophomore year. His coaches later recalled that, despite his size and strength, Austin was never aggressive. In fact, they sometimes criticized him for not being aggressive enough on the field. They would try to fire him up before games, hoping to channel some competitive fury, but it never quite worked. Austin was fundamentally a gentle person. In his journal, Austin revealed a different passion alongside science: creativity. In a 2014 essay, possibly for a class assignment, he wrote, "I also see myself as creative." He earned straight A's in his IB art classes, and even told his mother he thought he could write music to make money. More than anything, Austin was driven by a desire to help people. According to his father, Austin became obsessed toward the end of high school with identifying a career path that would allow him to help the maximum number of people. When he talked about it, an involuntary smile would spread across his face, a pure expression of genuine passion. His father lovingly began calling him the happy boy. Not everything was perfect, however. In 2010, when Austin was 13, his parents divorced. Within the same year, both Wade and Mina had new romantic partners. For Austin and his sister Haley, this was naturally disruptive, but they adjusted relatively well. Austin stayed in the family home with his mother and sister, while Wade moved to a house nearby. According to family members, the split family got along well. Wade remained actively involved in his children's lives, taking Austin fishing and spending regular time with him. The presence of new step-parents added complexity to the family dynamics, but on the surface, everyone seemed to manage. In 2015, shortly before graduation, Austin received the letter he'd been hoping for: acceptance into Florida State University's 4-year pre-med program. For someone who wanted to dedicate his life to helping others, this was perfect. The family was elated. The summer after graduation was, by all accounts, wonderful. Austin was on cloud 9, spending time with friends and family, enjoying his last carefree months before college. In August, his family helped him move into his dorm in Tallahassee, 6 hours north of Jupiter. They hugged him goodbye, confident that Austin was ready not just for college, but for independent adult life. And for a while, it seemed they were right. Austin's first year at Florida State appeared successful from the outside. He earned excellent grades in his biology courses. He met a girlfriend. Though he wasn't playing organized football anymore, he found a new athletic outlet in bodybuilding, and even built a modest social media following around fitness and working out. His family back home saw the Instagram posts and heard about the good grades. Everything seemed fine. But in the journal Austin kept throughout that year, a different picture emerged, one of deep insecurity and emotional pain. He documented a persistent sense that his peers didn't accept him. He wrote endlessly about his shyness, convinced that if he could just be more assertive and outgoing, people would like him more. The words on the page revealed someone desperately seeking connection but feeling fundamentally inadequate. At some point during his freshman year, Austin began using drugs regularly. His text messages from that period, later reviewed by prosecutors, showed a consistent pattern of marijuana use, along with experimentation with various other substances. According to evidence that emerged later, Austin was using marijuana regularly, alcohol frequently, often at fraternity parties 2 to 3 times per week, Vyvanse, a stimulant prescribed for ADHD, hallucinogenic mushrooms, LSD, and MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly. These weren't one-time experiments. The drug use was ongoing, with Austin oscillating between the artificial highs of various substances and the lows of his sober mind, a mind increasingly saturated with anxiety and depression. In his final month at school, Austin's internet search history revealed a disturbing pattern. He searched, "I think I'm crazy. What do I do? How do you know if you're crazy? How to deal with obsessive thoughts? Do I need to sleep? And what happens if you don't sleep?" He was beginning to question his own sanity, and he was right to be concerned. When Austin returned home to Jupiter for summer break in May 2016, his family immediately noticed something was wrong. The change in him was dramatic and disturbing. Within days, Austin moved his bed from his bedroom down into the garage. When his family asked why, he explained matter-of-factly that there were demons in the house at night. He stopped sleeping. Instead, he would patrol the house all night, walking continuously, never stopping. Every 2 hours, he would knock loudly on his family members' bedroom doors and announce that he was guarding them from the demons. You can imagine how his mother, father, and sister felt, confused, frightened, unsure what to do. At first, the family's response was to simply lock their bedroom doors at night to keep Austin from coming in during his patrols. They didn't immediately seek help. Perhaps they were in denial, or perhaps they simply didn't know what to make of the situation. But as the summer progressed, and Austin's behavior became increasingly bizarre, the family latched onto what seemed like an obvious explanation: drugs. Austin was clearly on something. They confronted him, and he admitted he was using various substances, psychedelics, stimulants, marijuana. The family focused all their efforts on getting Austin clean, assuming that once the drugs were out of his system, he would return to normal. But even when Austin claimed he had stopped using drugs, the bizarre behavior continued and intensified. He made statements that suggested a complete break from reality. He told his sister Haley that he was half horse. He told friends he was half dog. He claimed to have superpowers. He insisted he was invincible. On various occasions, he would stare at his reflection for long periods, seemingly confused about what he saw. His personality seemed to shift unpredictably. There were moments when he seemed almost normal, and moments when he appeared completely detached from reality. Austin's mother, Mina, became so concerned that she actually called the police before the attack. She told them her son was claiming to have superpowers and believed he was invincible. She was worried about what he might do. By mid-August, the family had decided they needed to use Florida's Baker Act, a law that allows family members to have someone detained for up to 72 hours for psychiatric evaluation if they're believed to be a danger to themselves or others. During this hold, mental health professionals assessed the individual and create a treatment plan. An appointment was scheduled, but it came too late. The evening began ordinarily enough. Austin went to Duffy's Sports Grill on Indiantown Road with his father Wade, his father's girlfriend, his sister Haley, and his close friend from childhood, the one he'd known since 2nd grade. Security camera footage from the restaurant shows the group seated in a booth toward the back of the establishment around 7:45 p.m. The video captures what happens next. About 3 minutes after sitting down, Austin gets up and walks toward the bathroom, but he doesn't go in. He turns around, walks toward the front of the restaurant, and exits through the front doors. He's gone for about a minute before returning and sitting back down as if nothing happened. Less than 10 minutes later, he gets up again. This time, he doesn't pretend to go to the bathroom. He just walks straight out the front doors and leaves. A few minutes later, Mina Haroof heard someone enter her home nearby. She went to investigate and found Austin in the kitchen, drinking cooking oil straight from the bottle. Parmesan cheese was scattered across the counter. He'd apparently been eating handfuls of it. Alarmed, Mina grabbed the oil bottle away from him and told him to stop. Austin did stop. He went upstairs, changed his clothes, perhaps because he'd spilled oil on himself, and his mother drove him back to Duffy's. She watched him walk through the front doors before driving away. When Austin returned to the table wearing different clothes and a different hat, his family was understandably confused and frustrated. His father, Wade, who loved his son deeply but was at his wits' end, said something to Austin that seemed hostile. According to reports, he asked, "What is wrong with you?" Austin's response was physical. He reached across the table and pushed his father's face back against the seat, pinning him there momentarily. Then he let go, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant for the third and final time. Austin's childhood friend jumped up and chased after him, but he was about 30 seconds behind. By the time he got outside, Austin was gone. The friend came back inside and told the group he didn't know where Austin had gone. At this point, Wade's girlfriend called 911 to report Austin missing. They were worried. They knew he was in the middle of some kind of mental health crisis. They had no idea where he was going or what he might do. Later, Austin would tell investigators a story that no sane person could understand or believe. He said that when he left the restaurant that final time, he saw a dark figure with a white face outside, someone he called Daniel. He believed this figure was evil, and he began running. He ran approximately 4 miles from Duffy's into a neighborhood he'd never been to before, a quiet residential area in Tequesta, just north of the Jupiter line. He didn't intend to go there. He just ended up there, running from the evil figure that may or may not have existed anywhere except in his mind. Then he saw it, a brightly lit garage with the door open, lights on, people inside. He believed he could get help there. He believed the people inside would help him fight off this evil presence. He ran up into that garage. It belonged to John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon. To understand the full tragedy of what happened, you need to know who John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon were. John Joseph Stevens III was 59 years old in the summer of 2016. He had spent decades building a successful landscaping company from the ground up. He was known as a hard worker, a devoted father, and a man who enjoyed the simple pleasures of life: fishing, spending time with his beloved dog, and relaxing with his wife in their garage. Michelle Mishcon Stevens was 53. She had enjoyed a successful career as a financial advisor before recently retiring. She was intelligent, warm, and deeply in love with her husband. The couple had married in June 1997, around the time they first met. It was a second marriage for both, and they had blended their families beautifully, with 3 children from previous marriages who all got along well. In a card, Michelle once wrote to John, which was later read at their memorial service. She called him her hus buddy, and wrote, "Each day when I turn the corner on Kokomo Lane, I smile when I see your truck, knowing you are home, and I will see you in a mere second." John had written to her, "I'm so in love with you, Mish. I feel like a new person, and I hope this new life of ours will bring joy to us both." In 2007, the couple decided to transform their garage into a special place. They furnished it with 3 comfortable couches, installed a flat-screen TV, added a coffee table, a barbecue grill, an ice maker, dartboards, and beach-themed decorations. They called it the Garage Mahal. The rule was simple. If the garage door was open, you were welcome. Come on in. Have a drink. Hang out. The couple loved hosting friends and neighbors. The garage became a gathering place, a symbol of their hospitality and their joy in community. On the evening of August 15th, the garage door was open. The lights were on. The TV was playing. John had taken their dog for a walk, and Michelle was relaxing in her favorite spot, probably looking forward to John's return. She had no idea that a troubled young man she'd never met was about to run up her driveway, believing her home was a place of safety. Across the street from the Stevens home lived Jeff Fisher, a middle-aged man who was friendly with the couple. He often watched their dog when they traveled, and he frequently stopped by the Garage Mahal to share a drink and conversation. On this particular night, Fisher had gone to bed early. He was lying in bed, starting to drift off, when he heard strange sounds coming from across the street, sounds that didn't quite make sense. He sat up, listening more carefully. Then he heard it, a woman's blood-curdling scream. Fisher didn't hesitate. He leaped out of bed, ran downstairs, flew out his front door, and looked across the street. What he saw chilled him. An unknown young man was near Michelle's car in the driveway, and Michelle was standing in the garage, visible through the open door, looking absolutely terrified. Fisher started running across the street. As he did, he saw the young man grab Michelle and throw her to the ground. By the time Fisher was halfway across, the man was on top of Michelle, beating her. Fisher ran up the driveway. The young man, Austin Haroof, leaped off Michelle, turned, looked directly at Fisher and said, "You don't want a part of this." Jeff Fisher was a fairly large man himself. He could have run. He could have called 911 and waited for help, but Michelle was right there, injured, possibly dying. He had to do something. He lunged at Austin. Austin swung back, connecting with Fisher's head, but there was something in Austin's hand, a knife. The blow opened a gash on Fisher's face. Austin swung again, the knife cutting Fisher's head, then his neck, then his back. 5 puncture wounds in rapid succession. Fisher felt his face go wet with blood. It was everywhere. He thought his jugular might have been cut. He thought he was dying. Austin was getting back up, coming at him again with a knife. Fisher made a split-second decision. He turned and ran, not away from danger exactly, but strategically. He ran into the Stevens' backyard, hoping to draw Austin away from Michelle, thinking maybe he could lose him in the property. He banged on doors, trying windows, creating noise and confusion. Then he looped around and made a desperate sprint back across the street to his own house. He never looked back. He didn't know if Austin was right behind him or not. He just ran. He made it inside, locked the door, and called 911. "Young man beating up a woman across the street," Fisher told the dispatcher, his voice tight with pain and fear. "I ran over there. I'm bleeding profusely here at the moment. Are either of them injured?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes, there's a girl laying on the ground. He beat her up. I don't know what happened. I've been stabbed in the back. I'm bleeding pretty bad." The call was placed at approximately 9:20 p.m. As Fisher waited for help to arrive, barely conscious, all he could hear from across the street were 2 sounds, loud, animalistic grunting noises, and someone screaming at the top of their lungs. He didn't know it yet, but John Stevens had returned from his walk with the dog. The exact sequence of events is partially unclear, but investigators believe that after Fisher fled, Austin continued his assault on Michelle Mishcon. She died from blunt force trauma and stab wounds, her body left in the garage where she'd been relaxing just minutes earlier. At some point during or shortly after Michelle's murder, John Stevens returned from walking the dog. He came home to find a stranger in his garage, his wife dying or dead. Without hesitation, John did what any devoted husband would do. He tried to save her. But John Stevens stood no chance against Austin Haroof in the midst of a full psychotic break. Austin attacked John with savage brutality, stabbing him multiple times. Then, as John lay dying on the garage floor, Austin did something that would horrify the nation and make this case international news. He began biting John Stevens' face. And he didn't stop. When the first deputy arrived at the scene, what she encountered was beyond anything she'd trained for. There was a massive stream of blood, perhaps 6 feet wide, flowing down the driveway between 2 parked cars. She drew her weapon and ran up the driveway. At the top, in the garage, she found a man lying on the ground, eyes open, barely conscious. He was looking up at her and quietly saying, "Please help me." That was John Stevens. On top of John was a young man, Austin Haroof, lying sideways across his chest. Austin had his left arm wrapped around John's neck, holding him in place. His right hand was doing something to John's face, but from her angle, she couldn't immediately tell what. She couldn't shoot. If the bullet went through Austin, it would kill John. Another deputy arrived moments later. He came running up the driveway, his hand on his weapon. He saw the blood. He saw the first deputy with her gun drawn, aimed at something on the ground. He came around to her left side to get a better angle. That's when he saw it. Austin had his right hand in John Stevens's mouth, fish-hooking his cheek, pulling it out as far as it would go. And then Austin would lean down and bite into the exposed flesh, tear away a piece, chew it, and swallow it. Large chunks of John's face were already missing. The deputy later said he only saw this for a second before instinct kicked in. He pulled out his taser and fired both prongs into Austin's back. Nothing happened. Austin didn't even flinch. He just kept biting. The deputy moved around to get a better angle, standing near the car. He pulled his leg back and kicked Austin square in the face as hard as he could. Austin's head snapped back, his mouth coming off John's face. But instantly, almost before his head had fully moved, Austin repositioned himself, got a tighter grip on John, and plunged his mouth back onto John's face to resume eating. The deputy kicked him again. Same result. Austin came off John for a split second, then went immediately back to biting. The deputy kept kicking. Over and over and over, he booted Austin in the face with every ounce of strength he had. Austin seemed completely unaware that it was even happening. By now, more officers had arrived, including a K-9 unit, "Release the dog!" the deputy shouted. The police dog, trained for exactly this kind of situation, charged forward and clamped its jaws onto Austin's right arm, the arm he was using to fishhook John's face. The dog yanked hard, pulling Austin's arm away from John's face. But Austin, seemingly impervious to pain, simply ripped his arm out of the dog's mouth, tearing his own flesh in the process, and repositioned his hand back on John's face. The dog bit him again, pulling the arm back again. Again, Austin tore free, shredding muscles and tendons in his own arm. A third time, the dog got a grip on Austin's arm and pulled it away. This time, the deputy timed it perfectly. As Austin's arm was being pulled back by the dog, the deputy kicked Austin in the face with all his strength. The combination finally knocked Austin off John's body. He flew backward and landed on his back on the concrete. The deputy immediately jumped over John's body and landed with both feet on Austin's face, smashing his head into the pavement. Austin was stunned, finally. The deputy whipped out his handcuffs, got one cuff on Austin's wrist, and started dragging him by the cuff, pulling him away from John, up the driveway, away from the victim who had endured unimaginable horror. But as soon as the deputy tried to put the second cuff on, Austin started fighting again. He looked up at the deputy and screamed, "Kill me! I'm eating humans! Kill me!" It took 3 more deputies to finally get both handcuffs on Austin Haruf. Once Austin was restrained, officers checked on the victims. Michelle Mishkon was deceased, having died from blunt force trauma and stab wounds. John Stevens, who had been alive when police arrived, died from his injuries. The cause of death was listed as multiple stab wounds, blunt force trauma, and severe facial trauma. Their dog was unharmed and was later given to one of their children. Jeff Fisher, the neighbor who had tried to save them, survived his stab wounds and made a full physical recovery, though he would be haunted by that night for the rest of his life. Shortly after being handcuffed, Austin became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors determined he had ingested some kind of poisonous chemical, most likely lawn care products or other toxic substances from the Stevens garage during the attack. The chemicals caused his organs to fail. He fell into a coma. For 11 days, Austin Haruf lay unconscious, hovering between life and death. Doctors worked to save him. And they succeeded. He woke up. Initially, law enforcement and the public assumed Austin must have been on some powerful drug. The prime suspects were flakka and bath salts, synthetic hallucinogens that were popular in Florida at the time, and had been linked to other violent, bizarre incidents. Flakka, in particular, was known to cause superhuman strength, extreme aggression, and psychotic episodes. It seemed like the obvious explanation. But when Austin's toxicology reports came back from the FBI lab, they showed something surprising. The only drug in his system was a trace amount of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, an amount so small it couldn't possibly explain his behavior. There were no bath salts, no flakka, no hallucinogens, no stimulants, except those administered by hospital staff. Austin Haruf had been essentially sober when he committed these horrific acts. Investigators examined Austin's phone and found revealing search history from the days before the attack. He had been Googling information about demonic possession and how to contact Oprah Winfrey for help, suggesting he knew something was desperately wrong. His journal entries and rap lyrics described feeling like there was an entity inside him, something wrong and scary that he couldn't control. When Austin finally woke from his coma and was questioned, he told a story that seemed completely disconnected from reality. He said he left Duffy's because he saw a dark figure with a white face, someone he referred to as Daniel, whom he knew was evil. He ran from this figure, covering about 4 miles, until he saw the brightly lit garage. He ran inside, believing the people there would help him fight off the evil presence. He claimed he tried to get Michelle to help him, but she screamed, naturally, since a crazed stranger had just run into her garage. Austin said he then believed she was a witch, so he attacked her. He said he drank a bottle of what he thought was alcohol, likely the toxic chemicals that poisoned him. He said he turned around and saw another figure in the doorway with a dog next to it, presumably John Stevens returning from his walk. And then, Austin claimed, his mind went completely blank. He said he had no memory of Jeff Fisher, no memory of John Stevens' face, no memory of biting anyone, no memory of the police arriving or fighting with them. His next memory was waking up in the hospital 2 weeks later. The defense hired Dr. Philip Resnick, one of the world's leading forensic psychologists. Dr. Resnick had worked on numerous high-profile cases and was highly respected in his field. He conducted extensive evaluations of Austin, reviewed all available evidence, and produced a 38-page report. His conclusion: Austin Haruf was experiencing an acute psychotic episode during the attack, and was legally insane at the time. But the prosecution wasn't taking this conclusion at face value. They hired their own expert. Remarkably, both experts, one for the defense, one for the prosecution, reached the same conclusion. The experts pointed to several pieces of evidence that suggested genuine psychosis rather than drug-induced violence. Complete indifference to self-preservation, Austin continued his attack despite being tased, kicked repeatedly in the face, bitten by a police dog multiple times, and threatened at gunpoint by multiple officers. A person under the influence of drugs would still retain basic survival instincts. Austin displayed none. Single-minded focus. Austin's complete fixation on John Stevens's face, to the exclusion of everything else happening around him, suggested someone who was entirely detached from reality. The progression of delusions, Austin's statements in the weeks before the attack, believing he was half horse, half dog, claiming superpowers, talking about demons, showed a clear progression toward a psychotic break. Lack of motive. There was absolutely no connection between Austin and the victims. No financial motive, no revenge motive, no sexual motive. It was completely random, the hallmark of a psychotic episode rather than a planned crime. Dr. Resnick diagnosed Austin with clinical lycanthropy, an extremely rare psychiatric condition where an individual believes they have transformed or are transforming into an animal, typically something resembling a wolf or dog. Clinical lycanthropy is considered a delusional misidentification syndrome. It's not a distinct disorder, but rather a symptom of underlying conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or severe psychotic depression. Only about 43 cases have been documented in medical literature between 1852 and 2020. The condition involves delusional belief in transformation into an animal, often accompanied by behaviors mimicking the animal, like growling, walking on all fours, or biting. It usually occurs during first psychotic episodes in young adults and can be triggered by neurobiological factors, cultural influences, or both. The diagnosis fit Austin's case eerily well. He had told family he was half dog and half horse. He made animal-like grunting and growling sounds during the attack. He bit his victim, behavior more animal than human. He displayed apparent superhuman strength, common in psychotic episodes due to the complete override of the body's normal safety limits. Research suggests that clinical lycanthropy may involve unusual activation in brain areas responsible for body image and self-perception. Neuroimaging studies of patients with this condition show abnormal patterns in regions that process proprioception, our sense of our own body's position and form. In essence, these patients may genuinely perceive their bodies as changing shape. It's not just a belief. Their brain is actually misprocessing sensory information about their own body. The case dragged on for 6 years. There were multiple reasons for the delays: Austin's medical recovery from the chemical poisoning, the COVID-19 pandemic shutting down court proceedings, complex legal arguments about competency and insanity, and the withdrawal of one expert witness due to health reasons. The victims' families waited and waited. Their patience wore thinner with each delay. Assistant State Attorney Brandon White faced a difficult situation. He had 2 mental health experts, one hired by the defense, one hired by the prosecution, who both agreed Austin was legally insane at the time of the murders. There had been a third expert, Dr. Michael Gamache, who had concluded Austin was not insane, but was experiencing psychosis from drug withdrawal. However, Gamache had to withdraw from testifying due to personal health issues. The prosecution requested permission to hire a 4th expert, but the judge denied this request. Under Florida law, the burden of proof is high. A defendant must show by clear and convincing evidence that they were legally insane at the time of the crime, meaning they couldn't distinguish right from wrong. But Florida also has another relevant legal standard. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense. However, the law defines voluntary intoxication narrowly, only applying to intoxication at the time of the crime, not to long-term effects or withdrawal from drugs. Since Austin's toxicology showed he was sober during the attack, even Dr. Gamache's theory about drug withdrawal wouldn't help the prosecution under current law. White later said publicly that the anger should be directed at Florida's laws, not at his office. We don't make up facts. We don't make up the law, and we are bound by both. On November 28, 2022, more than 6 years after the murders, Austin Haroof, now 25 years old, appeared before Circuit Judge Sherwood Bauer. A deal had been reached. Austin would plead not guilty by reason of insanity to 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and burglary. In exchange for this plea, he would be committed indefinitely to a secure mental health facility run by the Florida Department of Children and Families. He would not go to prison. He would not face the death penalty. Judge Bauer accepted the plea. Michelle's sister, Cindy Mishkon, an attorney herself, delivered a powerful and emotional victim impact statement. She had prepared extensively, reviewing thousands of pages of evidence, listening to jailhouse phone calls between Austin and his family, reading text messages. Her statement was methodical and devastating. "You can't even look at me?" she asked Austin directly as he sat at the defense table in his red and white striped prison uniform. "I began writing my victim impact statement when I was naive enough to think there would be justice," she continued. "The reality set in for me as I listened to tapes of your jailhouse phone calls with family members and the reading of pages of text messages in the year prior to the killings. You don't care about anyone but yourself. The only victim you and your family see in all of this is you, and the Haruf name." Cindy had reviewed the evidence of Austin's drug use in the year before the attack, the partying, the marijuana, the acid, the MDMA. She'd heard the phone calls where Austin's father seemed to make excuses for him, telling Austin, "This is not necessarily your fault." To her, this wasn't insanity. This was a privileged young man who'd been irresponsible with drugs and was now avoiding responsibility for the consequences. "Is it really so hard for you to understand that you are a cold-blooded murderer and not a victim?" she demanded. She characterized the verdict as white rich boy justice and said, "Here we are opening the prison doors for a double murderer." John's daughter, Ivy Stevens, addressed Austin with barely contained fury. "I cannot begin to imagine how terrified Michelle must have been when you attacked her. Beat her, stabbed her, broke her nose, knocked out her teeth." She spoke about her father. "The death of my parents could not have been possible without you. I am so angry that this is the only way that I can remember them now. I'm angry that they won't be remembered for the life they lived before you." She called Austin a murderer, a monster, and a coward for not taking responsibility for what you did. Looking directly at him, she said, "You have ruined lives and taken others. You're going to a hospital that is more like a vacation than a prison. I hope every second of every day you are haunted by what you've done. I hope one day you understand the pain you've caused." She ended with, "I hope you burn in hell." Judge Sherwood Bauer, who had reviewed all the evidence and heard from both sides, made his position clear. "Austin Haruf will be held accountable," he said. He acknowledged the family's pain and their desire for a different outcome, but explained that he was bound by the law and the uncontested expert testimony. The judge noted that Austin would be committed to a maximum security mental health facility indefinitely. He would not be eligible for release without a court hearing, and no judge in the future would be eager to approve the release of someone involved in such a notorious case. Practically speaking, this would likely be a life sentence, just served in a psychiatric hospital rather than a prison. But for the families, this was cold comfort. Austin's mother, Mina, also spoke. She expressed profound sorrow for the victims' families and acknowledged that nothing she could say would ease their pain. "I've spent countless hours over the years replaying the events of August 15th, over and over again in my mind," she said. "Every parent wants the best for their child. I did all that I could to try and get my son the help that he needed. I truly wish things had turned out differently." She described the son she knew, kind, creative, non-violent, and humble. She said the events of that night were incongruent with the beautiful, funny, and intelligent son I raised. But to the victims' families, these words rang hollow. Where they saw a murderer avoiding justice, the Haruf family saw their own tragedy, a beloved son lost to mental illness. As of today, Austin Haruf is confined to a secure mental health facility in Florida, where he will remain indefinitely. He is receiving psychiatric treatment for his diagnosed conditions. Under Florida law, he cannot be released without a court hearing, where experts would have to testify that he no longer poses a danger to himself or others. Given the notoriety of the case and the brutal nature of the crimes, it's unlikely any judge would approve his release in the foreseeable future. Legal experts have noted that in Florida, commitment to a mental health facility under a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict often results in longer confinement than a prison sentence would have. Unlike prison sentences, which have defined end dates, mental health commitments are indefinite and depend entirely on the individual's progress and court approval. Austin will spend his days in a locked psychiatric ward, under constant supervision, taking antipsychotic medications, attending therapy sessions, and living with the knowledge of what he did, even if he cannot fully remember it. For the families of John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon, the verdict brought no closure. They feel the legal system failed them. They believe Austin Harrouff manipulated the system to avoid true accountability. Jeff Fisher, the neighbor who tried to save his friends, rarely speaks publicly about that night. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological trauma of witnessing such horror and being unable to prevent it remains. The Stevens children lost both their father and their stepmother in one unspeakable night. They lost their childhood home. The garage mahal where so many happy memories were made became a crime scene. They lost their sense of security, their faith in justice, and the future they'd envisioned with their parents. Michelle Mishcon's family, her sister Cindy, her son, her other relatives, were robbed of someone they loved, someone who had just begun enjoying her retirement, someone who should have had decades of life ahead of her. This case leaves us with profound questions that have no easy answers. Could this have been prevented? Austin's family saw the warning signs. They planned to use the Baker Act to get him help, but they waited just a few days too long. If that evaluation had happened even 24 hours earlier, would John and Michelle still be alive? What role did drugs play? Austin was sober at the time of the attack, but his heavy drug use in the year prior clearly damaged something in his brain. Did the drugs cause his psychosis? Or did he start using drugs because he was already experiencing the early stages of mental illness and was self-medicating? The experts disagree. Is the insanity defense being abused? The victims' families believe Austin is faking or exaggerating his mental illness to avoid prison. But two independent experts, including one hired by the prosecution, agreed he was genuinely psychotic. How do we balance skepticism with scientific evidence? What does justice look like in cases like this? If someone commits a horrific crime while genuinely insane, unable to distinguish right from wrong, is punishment appropriate? Or is psychiatric commitment the more just response? And does it matter to the victims' families? How do we identify and treat mental illness before tragedy occurs? Austin exhibited clear signs of psychosis for weeks before the attack, yet he wasn't hospitalized. How do we balance individual liberty with public safety? At what point should intervention become mandatory? Clinical lycanthropy deserves deeper examination because it's central to understanding this case, and it's so rare that many people have never heard of it. The condition was first described in medical literature in the 1850s, but beliefs about humans transforming into animals date back thousands of years across virtually every culture. The medical understanding, however, strips away the supernatural elements and focuses on the brain. Patients experiencing clinical lycanthropy report a genuine belief that their body is transforming or has transformed, visual and tactile hallucinations, like seeing fur growing or feeling their face elongating, auditory hallucinations, hearing animal sounds coming from themselves, strong urges to behave like the animal they believe they're becoming, and complete conviction that the transformation is real, despite any evidence to the contrary. Modern neuroscience suggests several potential mechanisms. Body schema disruption. The brain has specialized areas that maintain our internal map of our body, what shape we are, where our limbs are, what we look like. Damage or dysfunction in these areas, particularly the right parietal lobe, can lead to profound distortions in body perception. Delusional misidentification. This involves abnormal processing in areas of the brain responsible for recognizing and identifying things, including ourselves. When these systems malfunction, people can develop bizarre but unshakable beliefs about identity. Dopamine dysregulation. Psychotic disorders typically involve problems with how the brain processes dopamine. Too much dopamine activity in certain brain circuits can lead to hallucinations, delusions, and complete breaks from reality. Clinical lycanthropy is treatable, though recovery isn't guaranteed. The primary treatments are antipsychotic medications to reduce dopamine hyperactivity, mood stabilizers if bipolar disorder is present, cognitive behavioral therapy once psychosis is reduced, and long-term psychiatric support. Most documented cases have responded well to treatment, with patients eventually recognizing that their transformation beliefs were delusions. However, without treatment, the condition can persist indefinitely or worsen. Austin's case had several classic features: a prodromal period, the weeks before the attack where he showed increasingly bizarre behavior, animal identification, claiming to be part horse and part dog, behavioral mimicry, the growling, the biting, the animalistic actions, loss of human social behaviors, complete disregard for social norms, laws, and self-preservation, and cannibalistic behavior. While extremely rare, There are historical accounts of lycanthropic individuals attempting to eat human flesh, believing it to be appropriate animal behavior. It's crucial to address a common misconception. People with mental illness are not inherently violent. In fact, people with mental illness are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. Studies consistently show only 3 to 5% of violent crimes are committed by people with serious mental illness. The vast majority of people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or psychotic disorders never harm anyone. Substance abuse is a much stronger predictor of violence than mental illness alone. However, there is a small subset of cases, like Austin's, where untreated, severe psychosis leads to tragedy. These cases are extremely rare, usually involve first psychotic episodes when the person and their family don't yet know what's happening, often preventable with early intervention, and disproportionately covered by media, creating a distorted public perception. The insanity defense is deeply controversial and widely misunderstood. The myths, it's commonly used and often successful. Defendants who use it get away with their crimes. It's easy to fake mental illness and fool experts. The reality, the insanity defense is used in less than 1% of criminal cases. It's successful in only about 25% of cases where it's attempted. Defendants found not guilty by reason of insanity often spend more time confined than they would have in prison. Expert witnesses are specifically trained to identify malingering, faking symptoms. In Austin's case, 2 independent experts reached the same conclusion. The prosecution's expert withdrew for health reasons before testifying, but had concluded Austin was experiencing genuine psychosis, though questioned whether it met the legal standard for insanity. Florida has particular challenges with mental health care: insufficient psychiatric beds for acute cases, long wait times for evaluation and treatment. The Baker Act allows only 72-hour holds, often insufficient for diagnosis and stabilization, lack of mandatory follow-up after Baker Act holds, and limited resources for families seeking help for adult children. Austin's case highlighted these systemic failures. His family saw the warning signs. They called police. They planned to use the Baker Act. But before the system could intervene, tragedy struck. Early intervention saves lives. By the time Austin's family decided to seek mandatory psychiatric care, he'd been showing obvious symptoms for weeks. Earlier intervention might have prevented this tragedy. Drug use and mental illness interact dangerously. Whether Austin's drug use caused his psychosis or whether he was self-medicating an emerging mental illness remains unclear. What's certain is that the combination was lethal. Mental health emergencies need faster response. The 72-hour Baker Act hold is designed for assessment, but in Austin's case, his family couldn't even activate it before the attack occurred. Systems need to be in place for more immediate intervention when someone is clearly in crisis. Expert testimony matters in this case. 2 independent forensic psychologists, one hired by each side, reached the same conclusion. When experts agree across adversarial positions, their findings should carry weight. The criminal justice system struggles with mental illness. Our legal system is designed to punish people for choices they make. It's poorly equipped to handle cases where the defendant's capacity to make choices was fundamentally impaired. From the victim's family's standpoint, none of the psychiatric evidence matters. Their loved ones are dead. Whether Austin was insane or not, whether he was on drugs or not, whether he remembers it or not, John and Michelle are still gone. They see a young man who partied throughout college, used drugs recreationally, made poor choices, and is now avoiding responsibility by claiming mental illness. They see his family making excuses for him. They see a system that protected the defendant's rights while giving them no voice until victim impact statements, after the plea deal was already done. Their perspective is valid. Their pain is real. Their anger is justified. From a psychiatric standpoint, Austin Harrouf was a young man experiencing his first psychotic break, an extremely dangerous situation that he and his family didn't recognize quickly enough or take seriously enough. The drug use may have contributed, but genuine psychosis is not the same as being high. His behavior in the weeks before the attack showed clear psychiatric emergency symptoms. The attack itself showed someone completely disconnected from reality. Punishing someone who was genuinely unable to understand their actions serves no purpose. It doesn't deter future crimes. Austin had no control over his actions. It doesn't rehabilitate. Austin needs psychiatric treatment, not punishment. It only satisfies a desire for vengeance. This perspective is also valid. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is that both perspectives have merit. Austin's actions were horrific and unforgivable. He was suffering from severe, untreated mental illness. He had engaged in risky drug use that may have contributed to or triggered his psychosis. His victims and their families deserve justice, but punishing someone who is genuinely insane doesn't serve justice. Yet refusing to hold him accountable feels like injustice to the families. There's no satisfying resolution because this case exists in the impossible space between crime and tragedy, between accountability and illness, between justice and mercy. One of the most horrifying aspects of this case is its complete randomness. John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon had no connection to Austin Haroof. They weren't targeted. They didn't do anything to provoke the attack. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Their garage door was open, as it always was, as it was meant to be. A symbol of their hospitality and joy in community became the reason they died. Austin ran 4 miles in a psychotic state and happened to arrive at their home. If he'd turned left instead of right, if he'd run 5 miles instead of 4, if their garage door had been closed that night, John and Michelle would still be alive. This randomness makes it even more terrifying and more unfair. This case created multiple categories of victims. The direct victims, John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon, who lost their lives brutally and senselessly. The attempted murder victim, Jeff Fisher, who acted heroically and nearly died for it, who will carry the trauma of that night forever. The families, the Stevens and Mishcon children, siblings and extended family who lost loved ones and watched the legal process play out for 6 years without getting the outcome they needed. The community, neighbors who lived on that street, who knew John and Michelle, who watched their friend's garage become a crime scene, who no longer feel safe in their own homes. The first responders, the deputies who encountered a scene that will haunt them for life, who had to fight a man in a psychotic state while trying to save a victim being cannibalized. The Haroof family, who lost their son in a different way. He's still alive, but the person he was is gone, replaced by someone capable of unspeakable horror. They too lost their sense of normalcy, their family reputation, their future. Austin himself, though it's difficult to feel sympathy for him, he is also a victim of severe mental illness. The person who committed these acts was not the person his family knew. He will spend the rest of his life living with what he did, even if he can't fully remember it. What do we take from this case? Take mental health seriously. If someone you love is experiencing symptoms like Austin showed, paranoid delusions, claims of supernatural powers, personality changes, insomnia, bizarre behavior, seek immediate professional help. Don't wait. Don't assume it's just drugs. Don't hope it will pass. Support mental health resources. Communities need accessible, immediate psychiatric care. The barriers to getting help for someone in crisis need to be lower, not higher. Understand the limits of the criminal justice system. Not every terrible thing that happens is best addressed through punishment. Some situations require treatment, not imprisonment. Honor the victims. Remember John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon for the lives they lived, not just the way they died. They were people with families, careers, dreams, and love for each other. They deserved the retirement they'd planned together. Acknowledge complexity. Cases like this don't have satisfying endings. They exist in moral and legal gray zones that challenge our ideas about justice, responsibility, free will, and mercy. Ultimately, this case leaves us with an impossible question. When someone's mind breaks so completely that they can't understand their own actions, what does justice even mean? Should we punish the acts themselves, treat the illness that caused them, or simply protect society from future danger? What about closure for the families who lost everything? There may be no satisfying answer. Maybe the best we can do is learn from this tragedy. Take mental health seriously, intervene earlier, support families in crisis, and build better systems for those who are suffering. John Stevens and Michelle Mishcon are gone. Austin Haroof can't undo what he did. The families will carry this pain forever. The legal system did what it could within the law. What remains is our responsibility to remember what happened on August 15, 2016, and to do better. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please reach out for help immediately. Call or text 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Text the word HOME to 741-741 for the crisis text line. Or call the NAMI helpline at 1-809-506-264. In an emergency, call 911 and tell them it's a psychiatric emergency. Many police departments have crisis intervention teams trained for mental health situations. Early intervention saves lives. Treatment works. Recovery is possible. Don't wait until it's too late. This script is based on public court records, news reports, trial testimony, and expert evaluations from the case of State of Florida versus Austin Kelly Haroof. The analysis represents an attempt to understand an almost incomprehensible tragedy from multiple perspectives.